What does it feel like when the old self is dying? If you, like me, have decided to make a radical change in who you are and ultimately to be the best that you can be, there is a journey between where we start out and where we end up, and in that center part of the journey is a place of the old self dying off as the new self comes in. Our humanity is based on so many levels, and the more research that is found out, particularly about the quantum realm, we realize that we are energy, emotion, psychological aspects, physiological. It's very complicated, and when we want to better ourselves to be all that we can be, there's going to be a natural dying off of what was to open a place for what will be. Each time you make a decision to do something different than how you have in the past, to act differently, to react differently, to think in a way other than was your customary way, each time you do this, you're going to feel greatly uncomfortable and often full of anxiety and overall discomfort. Why I make such a point of this is because I do have a degree in art therapy, and even with a deep understanding of the psychology of human beings, nevertheless, as I've been going through these changes on the journey from who I was to who I'm going to be, I've hit many thresholds and even walls of emotion, anxiety, and in that, one can feel perplexed and confused, even if you and I have a lot of knowledge about how the human mind actually functions. Just as when a child is developing, and from the time they're born, particularly through the first 7 years, their behavior can be steady, then erratic. They can seem to be very lovely and then really throw a tantrum. And that is the natural course from birth through 7 years old of how a person evolves. When you compile all of that with decades of how we have been and needing to change how we have been to the person we want to be, the reactions in our mind, body, soul, and spirit is going to be even stronger and more erratic potentially than a child from birth through 7 years old. So, my friend, if you think it's very uncomfortable to see a toddler having a temper tantrum, that is what is happening to you and I as we evolve from the person we were to the person we are going to be. To share some more concrete examples, even when I started this podcast, although I have decades of experience in business, in mental health counseling, and as a professional artist, nevertheless, when I started this podcast, I came up against myself repeatedly as I would sit down in front of the microphone and desire to share information. I have the knowledge, the wisdom, and the experience, but what I was coming up against was not that. It was instead the idea of who I am and allowing that person to die off so that I can become this new person, one that shares information and knowledge and helps others in a broader realm. Feeling anxiety and even panic is absolutely part of the old self dying. Because we are neurologically based and our bodies want to survive no matter what, then your mind and my mind are going to try to override any great changes that we want to enact. Because the human body feels threatened by change and truly thinks it will not survive if we change, then becoming someone new can be a battle. What is the solution to letting go of who we were and forming a new life and a new personhood? How do we go about doing that? Number 1 is make the decision, and number 2 is persist, regardless of what arises, of how much anxiety or panic you have, if how much the voice seemingly in your head tells you why you cannot do what you are trying to do. You have to persist and stay constant with the idea that truly you can create a new life for yourself and be the person that you always wanted to be. Sometimes you're just getting past the momentary blockade that you're facing. You may want to write a book and you sit down to do it, and the voices flood in about how you can't do it, how no one will buy your book. You may want to start a podcast and sit down in the microphone and think, no one wants to listen to me, and be full of panic and anxiety. Just know, my friends, that this is part of the path, and that's all that it is. Although it feels like the voice in your head, quote unquote, or panic, anxiety, and just overall discomfort will not go away, I promise you that it's just like a bully on the playground. Last man standing, you will win, and you will become the person you know you can be, and you will have the life that's carved out for you. That's a beautiful, expansive life. But in order to do that, you're going to have to persist and realize that truly the person you are has to die off, dissipate, and just plain old go away. The redemptive and uplifting aspect of all of this is that as you do not back down from the change that you want, and you continue to push through with what you've set out to do, again, I promise you that you will achieve what you've set out to do. You just have to persist. It's going to be difficult, uncomfortable, but you will succeed. If you project your mind forward to a year from now and see that every time you came up against a threshold of your old self, whether it was through worry, negative thinking, whatever the obstruction that arose, if you fast forward to 1 year from now and see that you consistently push through every barrier that arose, you will have a new life and be so much happier with the person that you are. Above all, my friend, do not be mean to yourself. Just push through and persist, but do not be mean to yourself. Just as a 2-year-old has a tantrum and then it ends, the old self dying off will pass, and you will have new neurology, new emotions, a different way of thinking, and be so much happier than you presently are. And find comfort in the fact that there has not ever been a human being who has accomplished something great that hasn't had to push through the transformation of letting their old self fall away and create a new and unknown person in place of that. You, my friend, have greatness within you. I believe in you, and so does God. If Swanky Genius encouragements helped your heart, we'd be ever so grateful if you liked, commented, subscribed, shared our podcast, and check out our book, journal, and coloring book series featuring Lamp the cat and Swanky Genius the bird, who are whimsical best pals at swankygenius.com.